You know, I've always had a thing for antiques. There's a certain magic to them, a sense of history that new things just don't have. That's why I spend most of my weekends at estate sales, digging through other people's pasts. A couple of weeks ago, I found something special. It was a mirror, tall and ornate, with a heavy, dark wood frame carved with these intricate, almost unsettling patterns. It was tucked away in the dusty attic of this old Victorian house, and the moment I saw it, I felt this strange pull. I had to have it. The price was a steal, so I loaded it into my truck and brought it home, feeling like I'd found a real treasure. I hung it in my bedroom, right across from my bed. It looked perfect, like it had always been there. For the first few days, everything was normal. I'd catch my reflection as I walked by, fix my hair, the usual stuff. It was just a mirror. But then, I started noticing little things. Tiny things you'd easily dismiss. I'd raise my hand to wave, and for a split second, it felt like my reflection's hand was just a fraction of a second behind mine. Or I'd smile, and the smile in the mirror seemed off. A little wider, a little less genuine. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was tired from work, that the weird lighting in my room was playing tricks on me. You know how you can convince yourself of anything if you try hard enough? I tried to ignore it, to brush it off as just being jumpy, but the feeling wouldn't go away. In fact, it got worse. The delays became more noticeable. One evening, I was standing in front of it, and I turned my head to the left. But my reflection, it held its gaze for a full second before it followed my movement. My heart hammered against my ribs. I did it again. A quick shake of my head. This time, the reflection didn't move at all. It just stared straight ahead, right at me. The face was mine, the clothes were mine, but the eyes were cold, and they were looking at me with an intelligence that wasn't my own. I backed away slowly, my mind screaming that this wasn't possible. I ran a hand through my hair, and the reflection just stood there, motionless, a faint, unnerving smirk playing on its lips. I barely slept that night. Every time I'd drift off, I'd jolt awake with the terrifying feeling that someone was in the room with me. I'd stare into the darkness at the giant, looming shape of the mirror, my imagination running wild. I knew I wasn't going crazy. Something was happening, and I needed proof. The next day, I bought a couple of small cameras online. I set one up on my nightstand, pointed directly at the mirror. I set another one up on my dresser, aimed at my bed. I needed to see what was happening when I wasn't looking, when I was asleep. I needed to know if I was just losing my mind. That night, getting into bed was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The air felt heavy, charged. I pulled the covers up to my chin and forced myself to close my eyes, every nerve in my body on high alert. The next morning, I woke up feeling exhausted, like I hadn't slept at all. The first thing I did was grab the cameras. I plugged the memory cards into my laptop, my hands shaking so much I could barely do it. I fast-forwarded through the footage from the camera, pointed at my bed first. Nothing. Just me, tossing and turning. A wave of relief washed over me. Maybe it was all in my head after all. Then, I opened the file from the camera pointed at the mirror. My blood ran cold. The footage started normally. It showed my reflection, sleeping in bed, mirroring my every move as I tossed and turned. But then, around 3 in the morning, I stopped moving. I was sound asleep. But my reflection wasn't in the grainy night vision footage. I watched in absolute horror as the eyes of my reflection slowly opened. It didn't move a muscle, just its eyes and its starred. It stared directly at me, sleeping in my bed. The camera was at an angle, so I could see both the real me, asleep and oblivious, and this thing in the mirror, wide awake and watching. Then, its chest began to rise and fall. It was breathing independently of me. A slow, deep, deliberate breath. And then, the corners of its mouth curled upwards into a sickening, malevolent smile. It watched me like that for over an hour, just breathing and smiling that horrible smile, before its eyes closed and it became my perfect, still, reflection again, just moments before my alarm went off. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't a trick of the light. Tease was real. There was something living inside my mirror, something that looked like me, but wasn't me. The very presence of the mirror started to change the room. The air around it was always cold, a deep, unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. And the strange occurrences weren't just confined to the night anymore. I'd be walking past it during the day and see things out of the corner of my eye. A shadow moving in the reflection. A tall, thin figure standing behind my reflected self. But when I'd whip my head around to look, there was nothing there. Just an empty room. The shadow was only in the mirror's world. One afternoon, I was filled with this strange mix of terror and morbid curiosity added to know. I walked up to the mirror, my heart pounding, and I reached out a trembling hand. The moment my fingertips touched the glass, a searing heat shot up my arm. It was hot, unbelievably hot, like touching a stove. I snatched my hand back with a yelp, staring at my red fingertips. The glass itself looked cool and smooth, but it felt like it was burning from the inside out. That was the last straw. I couldn't live with this thing anymore. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. It was consuming my life, my sanity. I felt its presence, even when I wasn't in the room. A constant, nagging feeling of being watched, of being hunted. That night, I grabbed the heaviest blanket I owned. I didn't even want to look at it. I approached it from the side, my eyes fixed on the wall, and I threw the blanket over it, shrouding it in darkness. The instant the fabric covered the glass, the room felt lighter. The oppressive cold vanished. It was like a weight had been lifted from my chest, and I could finally take a full, deep breath. The next morning, I didn't even bother making coffee. I wrestled the heavy mirror off the wall, carried it out of my house, and threw it into the back of my truck. I drove it to my storage unit, wrapped it in more blankets and tarps, and shoved it into the darkest corner, facing the wall. I just wanted it gone. But even with the mirror gone, something has lingered. The feeling of being watched hasn't entirely disappeared. Sometimes I'll catch a glimpse of a shadow in the corner of my eye, or I'll wake up in the middle of the night with that same cold dread I felt when it was in my room. It's like it left a stain on my life, an echo of its presence. So I'm telling you all this as a warning. Be careful with old mirrors. Be careful what you bring into your home, because you never know what history is attached to it, what kind of energy it might hold, or what might be looking back at you from the other side. Now, that estate sale, I remember them saying the previous owner had passed away. He was an administrator at the old, abandoned Northwood Sanatorium on the edge of town. I did some digging, and it turns out that mirror wasn't from the house. It came from the sanatorium. I don't know what happened there, but I have to find out. I have to know the history of this thing, what it is, and what it wants. Next week, I'm going to Northwood. I'm going to investigate the origins of this haunted mirror. Wish me luck. Subscribe and hit that bell icon, because you are not going to want to miss what I find.